Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks Andy.
Good. And I want to preface this a little bit because this is the first time we've done a podcast, with two people from different organizations. But Taylor, we have a mutual connection, and Julie from our team connected me to you. And in our conversation, we were talking a lot about trends that are happening in the HR place. And you're like, I've got somebody I know, right? And that's very specific to the dealer space. So first of all, if you wouldn't mind, could you draw the connection between you and Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having us, Andy. I, like you'd said, caught wind of what you guys were doing through Julie a few weeks ago. Obviously very interested in being a part of it. But when you and I got talking just about kind of this niche space, right, being dealership and recruitment and strategy in that space, my background is a little bit more kind of focused in technology and technology specific roles. But Scott and I have known each other for years, probably coming up on close to 10 years. We used to work together at a company called Aerotech. And he can kind of tell his transition to where he is today. But I thought there'd be nobody better to really kind of dive in and give us some insights on what he's seeing in their dealership. So I'm just glad he was willing to get together. I think we can kind of double team and give different perspectives of talent acquisition, and excited to hear where we go.
Good. Well, I want you both to be able to dive in a little bit about what it is that you do, where you got to where you are. But to kick this off, I've had a couple podcast guests on so far. Jeff Oldham, CEO at Green Mark Equipment, and then the Dohort family from Town and Country up in Northwest Iowa. And both of what they talked about to a vast degree was getting the right people kind of on the bus. And it was the talent acquisition, it was the hiring, and not just from, the cliche of, your people are your greatest asset, but it really moves the needle for them in terms of their strategy development and just driving their dealership forward. These people were coming up with new ideas, they're propelling precision, their parts department, they're leaders within the organization. And so I knew at that point that we really wanted to dive in deeper just because it's such a crucial piece of an equipment dealership. So I want to lay that groundwork here about how important this topic is to dealers. Scott, obviously, that, and so you're in the thick of it. Well, let's start, Taylor, with you a little bit, because Vesel Technologies might not be familiar, or everybody might not be familiar with what you guys do. So do you want to give a real brief explanation about what it is that Vesel does?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So we're a search firm. So we are here in Des Moines. My background for the last 10 plus years has been in recruitment. So I started with a larger agency, a couple larger agencies here in the Des Moines area, really cut my teeth when it came to recruitment, staff augmentation, managed service-based approaches, things of that nature. I mentioned before, most of my background is really focused in technology. Our firm services our customers kind of across the board, but really what we are is we go out and partner with organizations that are looking to scale or looking to grow, right? We serve as an extension of their recruitment workforce and do our best to connect them with top talent, whether that be, in a full-time hire type of a vehicle or contract to hire, or we also can help them build technology teams and deploy them into their environments. And so we really try to meet our customers where they're at, understand, them and what they're after from a scale perspective, and then try to create, resources for them to kind of hit their goals moving forward. So that's really what we are. Majority of our customers are here within the state, but we have some customers that are on the coast, and we support them through, like I had said, mainly direct placement or full-time search or a contract approach. One of those two vehicles for the most part.
Fantastic. And so now, Scott, van wall equipment, a lot of people are familiar with van wall equipment. So let's start though with you. Where did you start and how did you end up as the manager of talent acquisition and strategy there?
Yeah, well, Andy, I'll echo what Taylor said. Just thank you for the opportunity to be on with you and, Tractor Zoom. I know we do some partnership with you guys and are familiar. So, but my background, I'm originally from the Des Moines metro area. I went to Dowling High School here in West Des Moines. And then when I was looking at college, the thing that I was passionate about, I knew two things. I I really loved soccer, played soccer my whole life. And then I knew I wanted to get a business degree. That was something that other members of my family, my dad had done. And I knew that was kind of the space that I wanted to fall into. So when I was thinking about career and goals and what I wanted to do, I wanted to play Division I soccer and get that business degree. But I did not want to be in a small town or small city. I wanted to go to a bigger school. So I had an opportunity out at Loyola University Chicago. So went out to Loyola, ended up graduating there in 2012 with my bachelor's degree in marketing, and love Chicago, love everything it has to offer. But my family, my roots, everything was back here in Des Moines, and Iowa's a pretty good place to live. So found my way back to Des Moines. And when thinking about, career opportunities and what I wanted to do and, how I wanted to start my professional career, I got referred into Aerotech. That's where I got to meet Taylor. And we were, though, while we were at Aerotech together, Aerotech at that time was kind of divided up into like specialties per se. So where I started, I ended up being with Aerotech for 2 years. My first year, I was in their skilled trades area. So doing a lot of recruiting on maintenance techs, welders, diesel mechanics, machinists, things like that. Really enjoyed that type of recruiting, skilled trades, even that would have been back in 2012, 2013 timeframe. And even at that time, it was pretty hard. You needed to spend time sourcing candidates, selling an opportunity and working through that. And I liked that. It wasn't just someone that applied to a job and, you interview them and pass them along in the hiring process. It was screening specific skills and backgrounds. So did that for a year. And then I had an opportunity to transition to an even further technical field on the engineering side with Aerotech. So a lot of mechanical engineers, manufacturing engineers, embedded software engineers. And then we got into some highly specialized stuff too, like diesel emissions engineers, materials engineers. So things that people are going to school specifically to support. So really enjoyed that. But I think as I got to know the recruiting and staffing space, I think Aerotech gives you a great foundation to understand how to recruit. But the thing that I missed was the opportunity to build further partnerships. There are companies that we would work with, and I'd work with them once or twice, and I wouldn't talk to them again. Or it might be 9 months down the road. And I liked the continual relationship that we had built. And, the nice thing about also working for a staffing company is you get to work with all sorts of employers across the central Iowa area. One of those customers that I ended up placing or helped place a couple engineers at was Vermeer Corporation out in Pella. So had an opportunity to join them. I had a little bit of a hybrid role. Most of the time I was on site, but had the opportunity to work remote. So ended up joining Vermeer, was out there for 2 years as well, focusing on any and all engineering hiring, as well as their IT stuff. So highly technical stuff. And I really enjoyed it. Vermeer, great company, great values, great people. But as things kind of progressed, I came across Van Wall equipment, and at that time, my knowledge was not as much as it is today. But I had the opportunity to interview with our COO and get to know the company and its values, and being part of the John Deere brand with a family-owned company was really appealing to me. So I ended up making that move November of 2016, and it'll be 8 years in November this year that I've been here. So when I started with Van Wall, I was the first recruiter that they had hired. So there was a lot of things that I got to partner with our leadership on, building out hiring processes, standardizing, job descriptions and hire letters, and, ultimately just how are we going to attract and retain talent. So I was in that role for about a year or two, and then we needed to add to our recruiting team just because there was a need. So we added another individual to our team, and then you look at where we're at today. It's myself, and then we have 3 other people that specialize in the recruiting space at Van Wall. One of them focuses on our high school student technician program. Another person focuses on our college recruiting, so getting into precision technology and doing some full-time recruiting, not just on college campuses. And then we have another person who focuses a lot on just full-time talent, getting them to Van Wall. And then I get to have my hand in a little bit of all of that. So that's the, quick version of my career and how I've gotten Van Wall.
I think the fact that you guys have now 3 people on your staff that are working to recruit just showcases how important this is. But then to talk about the challenges, I mean, obviously it's challenging. You need people to help you do that. But throughout your career, I mean, you were hiring diesel mechanics, and I imagine welders, and then you go to engineering and trying to hire engineers down to Pella. Which
Mm-hmm.
I spend plenty of time working with the Vermeer folks, and I know what challenge and concerted efforts they go to try to attract engineers there. So you're a
Mm-hmm.
glutton for punishment. You
Yeah.
know challenges in the industry, and so. But then I want to showcase this over to challenges, and maybe Taylor, if you want to take this at a really high level, as far as the general U.S. economy right now, hiring into both tech and maybe non-tech positions. What are the challenges that are out there? And then Scott, do you want to take it from there? And what are the specific challenges that are facing the dealership industry right now?
Yeah, yeah, happy to chime in. I just think the landscape is continuously changing, right? And I think on many fronts. But if you just think the last few years, the COVID timeframe, right, and kind of what that did, just kind of across the board was pretty disrupting, right? We had individuals that could all of a sudden have more remote opportunities, right? And so people were lifting their heads up a bit, having access to roles that they maybe didn't have access to before. And so I think that the challenge is, the landscape is just ever evolving. And I think most recently we're kind of swinging back, the pendulum swinging back a bit to maybe being a little bit more geographical centered, right? Where we have organizations that are embedded here in our community, and they're starting to have a little bit more of a foothold on the candidates' attention. And so I think the challenges are just building a brand, meeting candidates where they're at to fulfill what they're looking for day in and day out when it comes to their employer. And I think that my point is that's changing, right? Maybe it was now remote's important. Well, maybe an office culture and being connected to an organizational brand is starting to kind of inch its way back into the conversation. So I think it's just continuing to keep a heartbeat and an understanding of what candidates are really after. And if you can do that or try to continue to meet folks where they're at, I think you're going to be one step ahead of the competition. And I think that's really the biggest challenge, is understanding what people are after and how you can provide that from an employer perspective.
Okay. Scott, how does that then translate down to the dealership level?
Yeah, I think, the easiest way to summarize it is there's competition for top talent. And I think there's always been competition, but it used to be you get an offer accepted and you work and talk through onboarding. Now you get an offer accepted and you're like, okay, well, when's the counter offer coming? Like it's another step of the hiring process that you kind of have to be prepared for. And I think, with recruiting, recruiting is about relationship building. It's about the opportunity and the opportunity to grow. So it's not just, hey, what job are you hiring for? Why are you interested? Things like that. It's identifying what skills are most transferable, selling them on how that may relate over to what we're doing here at Van Wall Equipment, engaging them as far as company culture, leaders within the business, growth and development opportunities, and then all right, you've done that. You've gone through it. Everyone seems to like each other. Then you extend an offer. They're still excited. And then it's continuing to engage them and keep them excited about the opportunity. I think that's the thing that's changed. It used to be offer extended, offer accepted, join the team. I think the recruitment, it does not stop, with our team members. Even when someone starts, it's, hey, well, their employer's probably reaching back out to them. I know it's been 2 months, but are you still interested? So then it starts to talk about, what's the employment experience? How are you holding true to the opportunities that you spoke about in the hiring process and truly driving employee engagement, driving employee development, and ultimately that creates a good culture, career opportunities, advancement opportunities. And, then when someone reaches out to a potential employee or, wants to reconnect or grab lunch and they ask, how's it going? The answer is, oh, it's going great. Like, I love what I get to do. So I think recruiting, it goes further and further and further into the career or the employee life cycle at a company.
Yeah, I think the days of the transactional approach are done, right? To Scott's point, it's building that relationship, truly understanding one internally what you have to offer individuals from an opportunity perspective, right? And then going to market and truly telling that story and being transparent. And I think that the individuals or the teams that can do that, and to Scott's point, then follow through on the back end after that individual's with your team, those are the people that are going to continuously win, right? Because then you're creating an experience for people that are going to go sing your praises, right? And do your recruitment work on your behalf. And that's the kind of thing that's gonna continue to attract and keep top talent, I think.
So we're going to come back to this topic, but I want to at least mention it now so I remember to come back to it. But this is so much like the sales process that we're having this discussion on right now. I mean, so we help dealerships with CRM system, Anvil Pro, and we use that to help people track all these relationships, because it's not transactional anymore, because it's building those relationships. And then even once, a tractor is sold, it's not hands off and it's done, because it's not just a tractor that people want anymore. It's the assistance, it's the partner, it's the relationship, overall experience. And I mean, everything that you're describing sounds just like the sales process. So when we get to it in about 2 to 3 questions, I want to talk to you about tools, because, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like a lot to manage, right?
It can be, we try here at Van Wall, we try to have a swift and smooth hiring process, but sometimes there's some additional steps if it's a little bit more, technical, or, it's a larger role within the business. So I think I mentioned it earlier, but it goes back to building rapport with candidates and being able to deliver, a great experience, a great candidate experience. So when they are in the hiring process, how are they being communicated with? What expectations are being set? And, ultimately how things are flowing. And so, as a person who's been in the talent acquisition space for 10 or 12 years now, it's holding yourself accountable. It's holding your hiring team accountable and making sure that we are delivering, that experience, because you deliver something that isn't great, or if you leave someone in the dark for a little bit too long, or you tell them you're going to follow up on Friday and you follow up on Tuesday, you start to think different things. Is this what it's like at the company? Is this what I can expect? And ultimately HR talent acquisition owns that experience. So that's one of the things, that when I work with our team is, how are we doing? Are we holding ourselves accountable for what we're saying and what we're delivering in the hiring process?
Good. Okay, so let's walk this back just a little bit. And Scott, your title has strategy within it. How does your overall dealership strategy filter down and affect the way that you acquire and seek out talent?
Yeah, significantly. It certainly starts at the top, but it quickly makes its way into our bucket of talent acquisition work. So we have goals for technician hiring. We have headcount growth goals for precision related things. So I think we're in full alignment. We know usually at the start of the year, and we do some quarterly updates and business reviews. So we know how things are progressing. We're tracking numbers, but we're very much in step with company leadership on our goals and objectives. There's some new things coming out with John Deere as it relates to precision related technology. I'm sure the autonomy stuff, the See and Spray stuff, all of that's coming down. So how we are structured as a business is evolving, and ultimately, the type of talent that we're needing on the team is evolving. The people that we may have needed 5 or 10 years ago in the precision space are very different than what we need today and 5 and 10 years into the future. So you aren't just hiring for, hey, what do we need right now? But what are the things that are coming down the pipeline that we need to be able to, articulate value, or, be able to speak confidently on, or repair or sell, whatever part of the business that you're on. Those are the things that we have discussions with regularly with our leadership. So when we are doing some sourcing and we are talking to candidates, A, we know what's coming, but B, we know what's a fit and what's not.
So,
and that's where you can start to separate yourself, right? Because in a transactional approach, or if you're just really trying to check boxes when it comes to skills or experience, that's all great, right? And it's relevant, and we need to understand that. But when you can truly tap into an organizational approach or their goals, or like Scott said, where are we going to be in 10 years? You start to separate yourself from the competition, because candidates are having these conversations all the time, right? They're inundated with messages and outreach. And when you can start to shift the way, you're approaching them, or you're bringing them information, it means something, right? And you're going to start to kind of rise above and separate yourself from the other recruitment or attraction teams that are really just, trying to get a button seat, right? You're really trying to tell them, hey, here's where we're going as an organization. Here's why we see you as a part of it. And that's what's I think impactful, and what sometimes, we maybe let go by the wayside when it comes to talent.
So Taylor, Scott was talking about technologies, and specifically about ones that they're hiring for: precision, the See and Spray, everything that's technical within a dealership. On a high level, do you have any advice for anybody that's out there hiring, whether they have a title of an HR manager or whether they're just an owner trying to hire a technician? Are there any technologies that can help them out in the recruiting space right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Our firm, we lean heavily on LinkedIn, and I know that's not always the answer, right, for certain industries and for certain skills, but we also tap into Indeed and other platforms. I think it's just really important to try to understand, kind of fish where your fish are, right? Kind of understand where your potential candidates are spending time, or what platforms or technologies are they using to connect to potential employers, right? So really kind of on the front end, trying to understand where you need to be, and then understand kind of what tools can help you get there. That's I think super, super important, is there are endless tools at the fingertips of folks like you had mentioned, and it's really understanding, where do you want to be and how do you get there, and then selecting tools that are going to help you kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah, Scott, do you have any specific to your dealership that you guys use?
Yeah, well, I think, a lot of companies, you have your applicants tracking system and your HRIS system. So I think those are imperative. But I'm going to echo a lot of the things that Taylor said. LinkedIn, we use that quite regularly to, build projects out and track candidates, and, making sure that those are up to date. And then same thing, Indeed would also be another, key tool that we're using to identify talent. So those two, paired with our applicant tracking system, are the main technologies that we're using today.
And I think on top of that too is, whatever tools you're using, I think the biggest thing that is incredibly important is the data that's within it, right? I mean, especially, like myself and Scott have access to manipulate whatever data is there, right? And as you're building projects, or, you're building that pipeline, keep good and meaningful data when it comes to the individuals, right? If I'm talking to Andy and I'm truly going to, help him, find his next role, right? Or help him grow his career, keep meaningful information about what's important to Andy, where he wants to be, what technologies or tools or industries does he want to be in and around, and then, use that in his behalf to help moving forward, right? When it comes to pipeline, when you're as a talent advocate, right, reaching out to Andy and validating these things that you have in front of you from data that you maybe took in years ago, right, you're really, again, going to separate yourself, because Andy's like, oh, he was listening, right? Or they understand where I'm headed and how, and they can truly advocate to help me get there, right? And so keeping that stuff buttoned up and meaningful and accurate, it makes a big difference, right? Because a lot of times employers are really only going to have their shot, right? Or if they have their one shot and make a strong and good impact, but maybe the timing just wasn't right, in a couple of years when things come back around, you're going to be well positioned to get yourself in front of that individual again, right? And then maybe that timing is right, and you can get them on board at that time.
So for the pipeline that you were mentioning, and Scott, I know you had talked about different programs that Van Wall is doing, high school. You're working with industrial tech classes at high school, some even at the college level. Is that where a lot of the technician pipeline comes from? Because I know in this industry, if you probably ask, 90% of the people where you're hiring challenges, it's going to fall in that technician spot.
Yeah.
And so what about you guys? What works, what doesn't from your technician pipeline?
Yeah, so we kind of are attacking it from a couple different angles, because you need to, because that is the kind of the lifeblood of the majority of dealerships. You have to have people that have technical knowledge on how to repair the equipment and provide a great customer experience. You mentioned it kind of goes back to sales. It is kind of like sales, when you're looking at that. But yeah, I'd say that the two main avenues would be our student technician program. So we partner with a couple different colleges that would provide an associate's degree in John Deere ag diesel mechanics. And then we also have our own program that we started and partnered with DMAC on their Boone campus, which gives the individuals an opportunity to earn an associate's degree in power equipment. So those are our three kind of partners as it relates to schools that we are sending students to. But yeah, as far as identifying students, it's very much it's time, it's effort, it's dedicated, and it's having the opportunity to tell your story. And you want your story to be consistent. So as you have opportunities to get out and talk at high schools and talk with FFA chapters and talk at 4-H events, whatever it may be, you want a consistent message and you want to highlight the opportunities. So, with us, we're providing a full tuition sponsorship. There's paid OJT. There's structured internship, opportunities as you've joined our team. I think if you look back a little bit, people may say 10 or 15 years ago in a dealership, an internship was just moving equipment around and washing tractors. Like that's not what's going to separate you from your competition. And we've realized that. And we have worked really hard to build out an internship experience that's meaningful from when they're 16 years old to when they graduate and they're 20 years old and now have their associate's degree. What does that look like? What does the progression look like? And, it's exciting to see where we were a handful of years ago and where we are today, because it's something that we're very proud of. And it's something that we'll continue to work on as the technology evolves, as what does a technician mean, at Van Wall and within a John Deere dealership. Those things are changing. So we want to make sure as we are preparing our talent and growth throughout the dealership and their education, that they're learning the right things and the things that's going to make a big difference once they are a full-time team member, or once they are 5 years out of school. How do we set them up for success? And I think we've had a lot of dialogue and a lot of time and effort with our corporate service teams, our leadership, our talent acquisition team to make sure that we're delivering on that and trying to get better. I think there's always opportunities, that come up, or, maybe we could have done this, or maybe we should have tried this. And, we have those conversations and we're gathering that feedback regularly.
I think on top of that too, that's all really great stuff, Scott. And admittedly, I don't play in this space really at all, right? But from an outsider looking in, and I think in my conversations with Scott in the past, it's incredibly impactful to be in front of those audiences when you guys are, right? And I think there's a lot of false narratives or just lack of understanding with what the career path and advancement and opportunity could look like, right? And so when you come in and say, hey, here's what we have to offer, right? And we're going to give you this experience. We're going to set you up for this level of success. It's incredibly impactful, right? And I think a lot of times, I think a lot of people could relate coming out of high school. You're like, I don't know what I want to do, right? You spoke to it earlier, Scott. You want a business degree, but what's that mean, right? And so I think when you can arm individuals with the information that they need to understand, okay, this is something I'm drawn to, I'm excited about, I'm good at, it can really, you can get a hook in people, right? As opposed to just, saying, hey, we're going to let them kind of go about their, educational journey and we'll snag them if we can, right? I think the more education you can provide, and maybe it just says, maybe someone understands that, hey, this isn't for me, right? That's a win too, right? You can still help them navigate their journeys through the experiences you guys are providing. So I think that's incredibly impactful to help attract great talent.
And I can speak from when I was teaching at the college level that rarely, I don't know if ever, did an employer come to me and say, hey, I'd like to come speak to your class. I'm going to offer up this type of content. I'm going to give my experience and my expertise. And then at the same time, I knew that they were putting their brand there, that the students would be able to see their logo, make those kind of connections. But, and I can't speak for all schools out there, but the insight that they would provide in a half of a class period, that was invaluable. So I would say if a dealership's out there and not doing this, take the initiative and make sure you reach out to whatever program is close to you or whatever program makes sense, because probably more often than not, somebody will say, yes, I would love to have your content help fuel my students. It's just, it can be a win-win.
Absolutely.
Good. Okay. So changing gears here a little bit, I had mentioned a few minutes ago that we wanted to talk about tools. And there's, tools can be a lot of different things if you're using it to manage your process, but also on the like hiring piece. When you actually have a candidate and you're trying to assess, are they a good fit for the job? I've heard things from, the personality assessments and whether or not it's used to actually gate people or just understand them better, or, pipeline management. What kind of tools do you guys use? And Taylor, maybe again, start at the high level in the industry. And then Scott, if there's any particular tools you guys use at your dealership, I'd be interested in hearing about those.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so, to be clear, our role, right, is serving as an extension of organizations' recruiting firepower, right? So we are touching, dozens of different organizations, and they all operate very differently. And I think we see a whole lot of different things when it comes to assessments and how to really understand the individual and maybe their technical depth. And I think overall, I would say, I think there's some sort of technical assessment embedded in the process, right? So we always try to influence, moving quick, providing timely feedback, being transparent in the process, right? And getting them in front of individuals that are appropriate and can provide value, but don't overdo it, right? We don't need them to meet half the organization, just the stakeholders that are appropriate. But I would say, the majority of the roles we're filling, right, are like software engineers and network folks, infrastructure folks, security folks when it comes to technology. And I think there's always some flavor of an assessment, but I would say more times than not, it's more of a conversational approach, right? Just kind of setting the stage or maybe have some sort of baseline problem you want to work through, one-on-one or as a team, and then conversating through it. And if it's the best approach for the individual, if the individual says, hey, I want to code through this, right? And we're just going to walk through it hands on keyboard. Great. Or maybe it's, hey, I have no problem kind of just talking through it and getting you to some sort of a solution or showing my, problem solving approach through conversation. That's great too. But I think I'm seeing a little less structure when it comes to assessments and technical kind of exams, if you will, and just moving more towards conversation. And I will say, from a candidate perspective, I think that lands a lot better, right? If an organization is saying like, hey, I'm going to bring you a real business problem there or technology problem that we have. Here's, this long document. You have a week to work on it. It lands a bit flat, right? People are like, this is just extra homework that I don't, have time to do, right? And so trying to kind of take an approach where you can get some feel for their technical depth, but at the same time being respectful of their time and effort, I think is really kind of the answer that I think people can get excited about, if that makes sense.
Scott, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so we have been very committed. My entire time here, we utilize a profile assessment for pretty much all of the roles that we're hiring for. The assessment is the same, and basically what it does or what it helps us understand is candidates, communication styles, candidates management styles, and what it does is it helps us compare to people that have been in that role previously. And being, there's a range and there's some information that's provided. Being above the range or below the range isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing. But what it allows us to do is it arms us with the ability to further screen that individual on, a handful of things that may seem, not status quo for the role. And again, not that it's good, not that it's bad, but it allows us as interviewers to better understand their background to make sure that this is the right job. This is the right fit for them within our dealership group. So what it does is it helps us in turn provide a better interviewing experience, a better candidate experience. And if we're hiring you, we've vetted you appropriately. And this tool helps us do that. So we've been committed to that. I think before I've been here, I think it's been at least 10 years that we've used that. So that is something that we've integrated within our hiring process.
Is that something, Scott, that you would use like post-hire? Like would your teams or leaders use that information, at a 6-month check-in, right? To say like, hey, here's how we assessed you, but is that something you guys do?
So that tool particularly, it wouldn't be necessarily at like a 6-month check-in, but what we do is say we hire Andy as an ag technician. You joined the team, you've been with us for 2 or 3 years and you've killed it. You have interest in being a service manager. You apply to be a service manager with us. We can rerun that assessment for the service manager function. And that, again, helps us understand job fit, helps us understand how to maybe hit on a couple areas within the interviewing process to make sure Andy's head's in the right space to, take on that role and help us understand what his approach would be. So I think, yes, we do use it, quite frequently when there's internal movement into a different job. We'll reuse it, but it takes a little bit of a different approach.
Sure.
Yeah, in my past conversations with Jeff Oldham up at Greenmark, they do a disc assessment up there.
Okay.
And then the Dohorts had a philosophy of, he felt his job was really finding the best fit for the person. Whether it was at their place, sometimes not even at their location, but even within the location. Then, Scott, to what you're mentioning, is it this particular position or is it a different position that we had? Mm-hmm. And he really took that as his personal responsibility to do, what you're talking about.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think whether you're the owner of a company, someone in recruiting, a hiring manager, you have a personal responsibility to make sure if you're talking to someone and you really like them, get them in the best spot to be successful with their interests and where they're at in their career. And if you don't want to force it, because if you force it, great, they're on the team, but are they truly happy with what they've articulated in the hiring process on what motivates them to come to work every day? If that's misaligned, well, things could be short-lived. And like Taylor said, you have one shot with a person and their employment experience. You mess it up, that doesn't look great for anyone. So
everybody loses.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take this now that once somebody's on your team, okay, they're riding the bus, and they might even be in a great position, but they've got more upward potential. What programs do you guys recommend for training? Because I've heard everything out underneath the sun, from just book clubs, bringing in executive coaches, running Dale Carnegie courses, and I'm sure there's no silver bullet. So, what programs do you have experience with? And then how would a dealership vet all the different options that are out there for them?
Well, I can start, with us. I think there's lots of opportunities, that you have to upskill and continue to engage your talent, especially when you realize you get someone on the team and you're like, okay, like they're a high performer. They want more, they need to grow, and we need to help them. So there's a few things. So within the John Deere dealership world and partnering with John Deere, we have JDU, or John Deere University. So, upskilling, via technical knowledge, different areas, or types of equipment is something that we would use. Additionally, we have regional managers, and those regional managers can help pull them into different situations. If we see someone that maybe, has a little bit of upward potential, maybe it is coming in on an interview, or maybe, they are a technician, they want to be a service manager. Maybe they're mentoring some of our tech students, so they can get a flavor of, leading someone's day-to-day work, or helping provide guidance, or helping provide coaching. So some of it's just getting people real-time opportunities to develop their skills. So I think those are readily available. I know our leadership, pending role, pending person, there are book recommendations that we've done, but I think, our approach is try to be a little bit more hands-on with that, try to provide real situations and, work with growth there. I think, we look 5-10 years into the future. I think there's going to be a lot more, sit down and, this is our leadership development course, and, how you can progress that as an emerging leader within the organization. I think all of that is coming, but today a lot of it is a little bit more practical. And I think there's some thoughtfulness to it as well. People know if you're getting asked to join this or, attend this meeting, that is a developmental opportunity. And then as we've grown our internships on the precision side, as we've grown our internships, for our student technicians, that has created other opportunities to learn and grow and, help lead people if that's what development means to them.
Yeah, I'd pile on to say, again, coming through a different lens here, when we're representing, we sit in the middle, right? We represent candidates and we represent organizations, and we try to kind of bring the two together. I think the biggest thing that I always recommend or try to help individuals vet out is like, what's the appetite for pouring into their individuals once they're in their roles, right? Like, what's the budget or approach when it comes to letting technology professionals attend different, breakouts or travel to get exposure to different technologies or releases and things like that. I think it's just, coming prepared to have that conversation. It's like, what's your overall appetite as an employer for this, right? Or how formal do you have this in your organization today to give me access to whatever I need to continue to push the needle in my role? And then to Scott's point, I think mentorship is huge. Internal mobility, right? Like having programs around what's upside, or maybe I'm in a role to Scott's point, and I want to get into the service space, or I want to get into some technology roles and grow there. Well, what does that look like? How can you help advocate for mobility internally within your organization to keep people there, right? If you have a high performer, you don't want them to perform out of their role and then take a role at another dealership or another organization, right? It's like, how do we create that opportunity here, right? And maybe that looks a little bit different than our standard, job track, right? Get creative, provide opportunity that is going to challenge individuals to grow and stay within your organization.
Oh, go ahead, Scott.
I just wanted to add in one thing, and we talked about like talent attraction and, talent acquisition, but I think this gets into the performance management piece, and it's how are you engaging your current team members? I know with my team and a number of our leaders within the business, it's, when you are doing performance reviews or when you are talking about like, hey, how are you doing? A lot of this isn't just I wake up one day and I want to be a manager or I want to advance. It's usually months or likely even years in the making. If you've come in and you've been a technician for a couple of years and you want to be a service manager, well, having that conversation with your manager so we can have an opportunity to serve you. We can't just create opportunity when we had no idea. If you just speak up and say one day, like, I've been thinking about this for 6 months and I'm ready now. It's like, well, we could have done a lot for you in helping you with JDU or bringing you in other conversations or having you shadow someone else at a different location. So there's a lot of opportunities that can come with the performance management piece and how you're engaging your current team members.
And that ties on the front end too, Scott, like we've talked about, right? Like when you are attracting talent, have those meaningful conversations about, here's what I'm great at today, or here's what I can provide the organization today, but where do you want to be down the road, right? And then arm your hiring teams with that information, right? So they can speak to that. They can, help that individual understand that job track and career growth. And then on the back end, like Scott mentioned, performance management wise, like we know what this person wants to do, right? Because we ask those questions, and then we're going to continue to check in on that as this individual grows within the organization to make sure you're continuously meeting their needs and not just making assumptions about, hey, this is how we've done it. This is how you grow. Like, being checked in to where your employees are in their growth trajectory.
Yeah, that's good. And full of very applicable stuff that I think a lot of dealerships can take and run with now. And one that I hadn't even thought of, Scott, you'd mentioned the mentorship. If you've got a technician, even an entry-level technician, how do you get the experience to manage, without having people to manage? But if you're working with the high school or college students, give them the opportunity to, oversee that apprenticeship or that internship. That's a great early thing that they can do. Just get a little bit of experience, and for you to be able to witness and give them feedback on how that's going. And then getting into the conversation that you guys had mentioned about the internal mobility. And that was one of my next questions, because, that historically has been a big motivator. What's the options for me at your dealership, at your business, for me to climb the ladder? But I know, especially ever since COVID, there's been a lot more talk about work-life balance. Pay is obviously always in there. Where does internal mobility rank right now in terms of desirability to work at a place versus, things like work-life balance, pay, benefits, all those different options out there? I mean,
Yeah, I can start, Scott, and then you can jump in. I don't work in this space all that often, but I think it's huge. And I think I say that because when that comes to the forefront, I think it's a different approach, and people start to think about things a little differently. I think the challenge is, for organizations or dealerships or whatever, is it's a bit of a mindset shift, right? Like, leadership within their individual silo or space within their organization can at times be protective of their talent, right? Like, hey, no, like Andy's staying here, right? Because he's a top performer and he makes me look good, right? And things are going well. And I think it's kind of shifting it to where, it's an organizational approach and you want the best people in your organization. And that's what comes first, right? It's not about, hey, we want Andy to stay here because it serves us. I think it's more about, again, Andy said, he wants to be a technician today, but he mentioned, he loves this or that, right? And saying, hey, you come in, we're going to create the opportunity for you to get there, right? And we're going to build plan and mentorship and opportunity for you to get exposure to this thing maybe nothing about, but you're interested in, to continue to vet out whether that's where you want to be and help you get there, right? But again, it's a different approach than, hey, I'm hiring for this skill and that's where you're going to be, right, for the next 25 years until you're right off in the sunset. It's more of an approach of, hey, let's bring in really strong, moldable individuals and create a path for them to be successful here.
Yeah, on my end, I would say it's person dependent as far as, that career growth and how it ranks. But I think everyone wants to have some form of career growth. I would say rarely do you hire someone and then they're just in the position for 30 years. But even if they are, there is career growth that occurs. So I think when you talk about going back to performance management, career growth or growth and development means different things to different people. Sometimes, like you said, Andy, it's climbing the ladder. I want to start here and I want to end there. And, there's different job titles and responsibilities, and it's a little bit more formalized. So there's some people that like that and want that, and that's what motivates them. There's other people that career growth, it just means I get a raise every so often and I want to grow my earnings and I want to continue to add value to the organization. There's other people that career growth is, I want to stay up to date with the latest and greatest. So if I can attend conferences, if I can attend different JDU classes or courses, if I can, continue to work with different types of equipment every few years, that's growth and development. So I think a lot of it is engaging your talent and understanding what it is. Likely it's going to be a combination of all of that. But different people want different things. And so you have to know your team members, have those conversations every so often so you can provide the growth and development that they're looking for in their career.
That's good. And it gets back to what we had talked about earlier about, whether it's the pipeline, whether it's hiring or now having them on your team, it's about building those relationships. You do that through conversation, communication, and just essentially being close to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So, about technicians in particular. And so, Scott, this is, you've worked at Vermeer, you've worked at Van Wall. Why has it been so tough? And I'm probably talking maybe the last 10 years. So from the, 2010 till now in 2024, it's kind of been the focus for a lot of dealerships. Mm-hmm. Why has it been tough? And then do you have any ideas on, things to alleviate the pain?
Yeah. Well, I think, I've looked, I don't have the information in front of me, but I know that, call it area of the workforce. So call it mechanics, whether you're working on the railroad or, at a construction dealer, truck dealer, there is a greater need for that space, and there isn't as many people coming into that space. And then you look on the back end, there's people retiring, there's people, advancing, into other roles, and that funnel on the other end isn't coming in as quickly as it needs to. So that's just the simplistic approach I think lots of people can understand on like, why is there a shortage? But it starts with just surely the amount of people interested in the field. Why it's been challenging, I think, speaking from my experience, I when I was in high school, there wasn't a ton of people pushing a hands-on like a welding or a machining or, a mechanics trade. I had no one come in and present to my class. Like I didn't know what was available. So I think unfortunately, it's a little bit more reactive than proactive at this point. But ultimately, how do you increase that funnel? And I spoke a little bit to our recruiting efforts that we're doing on the high school end. We have spent a significant amount of time and effort and investment in providing opportunities to people, talking about, what a career at a John Deere dealership looks like as a technician, and ultimately just selling the opportunity. And when I say selling, you don't want to force anyone to do it, because that's not going to end well for them. It's not going to end well for us. But what we want to do is we want to give them an opportunity to see if this is the right fit for them. Van Wall, we are a registered apprenticeship through the state of Iowa. So what that allows us to do is have a pre-apprenticeship program. If we were not, we wouldn't be able to have 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds in our shop. So we've done that. There's a lot of work that goes into having a registered apprenticeship. And then ultimately it's providing that opportunity and putting the work in to engage, local high schools, talk about our program and make sure everyone in the organization, I talk about this all the time with our hiring teams. Recruiting isn't just the job of our recruiting team. Recruiting is the responsibility of every single person at our company. And so making sure people know the opportunities that we can provide to, students or people that are interested in having a career as a technician is very important. So to get back to what we were talking about is like, why is it tough? Why is it hard? And what can we do? We've honestly taken it upon ourselves to build and grow our pipeline. And then the second piece, and I was going to mention this earlier, but kind of got sidetracked a little bit, is having, sourcing efforts on LinkedIn, on Indeed is critical. There are people that are in their career that might not be happy or circumstances have changed. And how do you engage that talent is of the utmost importance. So working with, I do that, sometimes on a regular basis. And then, other members of our team are as well. So that approach paired with, the high school engagement has been, a contributing factor to us making some progress in that area.
So I got to ask you right now, because obviously I don't hire a lot of apprentices. So I am not registered in the state of Iowa. How do you even go about doing that? Who do you call?
I don't have it handy, but if you're just in front of a computer, I would just Google registered apprenticeships in the state of Iowa, and you should be able to find some stuff readily available. There is a person that's specifically within our sector. They help out with, HVAC companies and John Deere dealerships or whatever it may be. But that would be the easiest step. There is a specific contact. I don't have it readily available, but truly just how to start a registered apprenticeship program in the state of Iowa will get you on the right track. I know it sounds a little bit archaic, but that we weren't too far off from that, when it was 5 or 6 years ago when we embarked on doing so.
Yeah, I can certainly chat GPT that. And, but it's good to at least know that the state's got somebody allocated. That once you at least reach out and connect with them, because I can imagine for a lot of dealerships, especially ones that, might not be the size of Van Wall, might be sitting there thinking like, I don't have the time or the resources to even do that. But again, you don't know until you ask. Reach out to the state. And I mean, if they've got people there that can help assist, that's a good helping hand.
It does take some time, and you have to have good documentation. Like with all things, they just don't hand things out through the state, and there's, different regulations that you have to have and keep and uphold, and, it can be audited or whatever it may be. But you just want to make sure that, A, you're providing an opportunity that you're selling and delivering on, and B, on the back end, from an HR standpoint, you're keeping compliant with all of those regulations. So it does take work, but once you get it down, it's, kind of like clockwork. You just know when you have someone new and know when you have someone exit the program. There's a few things that need to go on.
Okay.
I think the biggest takeaway there, and props to Van Wall, is initiative, right? Like, I think you have to choose to participate in like changing where things are, right? Like, it's gotten to this point, and it's difficult in a lot of different industries to make hires, but then how can you participate in kind of making that shift, right? And getting in front of the audiences when maybe you weren't before. And I think that's what that to me, that program is so cool, because you're being innovative in trying to solve the problem, as opposed to just saying, hey, doing what we know, we're posting jobs, we're doing what we can, right? Like try to get out in front of folks and help attract them to the organization. It's awesome.
Okay. Good. So I've got a couple questions for you guys, just to add, a bit of, personal context into this as well, like what drives you and all of that. But before we get there, I had our HR director, Julie, the accountant contact here, ask about a specific question, and it's about the qualities that you look for in candidates. And I know this could be broad because you all hire for a lot of different candidates. But you've got attitude versus aptitude. If you guys had to pick on one of those two, what's your evaluation of attitude versus aptitude? And then Scott, specifically for you, because I've talked to a lot of dealers about this. I grew up on a farm, but I know there's a lot less farm kids out there. What's your take on being able to hire kids from a farm, or is it even something that you consider anymore? But Taylor, attitude versus aptitude first.
Yeah, great question. And this obviously is so dependent on the scenario, right, and the organization and the skill needed and the role, and you can go on and on, right? But I would probably lean towards that attitude, right? How quickly can you build rapport? What does the communication look like from these individuals? I think that's what kind of helps me separate, and then on the back end look to validate hard technical skills. I think, but on the front end, I think I would lean towards attitude for a lot of the things we've talked about the last hour, right? Like how they're going to come into the organization and start to separate themselves and pour into the organization and the culture. I think, in my opinion, you're going to have kind of a higher batting average on those folks as opposed to just really leaning into their aptitude or skills, okay, in my opinion.
Scott, what about you?
I'm going to agree with Taylor. So I would, say attitude would be my answer. And, when I think about, candidates and what's a fit at Van Wall and, attitude versus aptitude, I think, your aptitude, which you can summarize to your qualifications, is what gets you an interview. It gets you into the room. But just because you're in the room doesn't mean you get a job. So then it's your attitude that earns you the job. So you do have to articulate and demonstrate some proficiency, but ultimately your attitude is what comes out in an interview. Yeah, your skills, and you're talking about your projects and things that you've done, but attitude is important. But when you think about Van Wall, you're like, okay, well, what are the traits? Like, what attitude traits are you looking for? What's most important? And we get this question from candidates a lot. And it's a fun thing to talk about because it's something that I'm passionate about, and it's something that's evident daily at Van Wall. Whether you're in accounting or sales or HR or, precision related positions, the things that we look for are similar across the board. So the first thing is just a work ethic. When you think of agricultural, related positions, we want someone who has a work ethic that, provides to the customer experience. It provides to taking ownership and accountability of your work. So I think the work ethic needs to be there, again, regardless of role. The second thing is, we're a family-owned company. We started as a single dealer, and now we have 35 plus locations across the Midwest. And, we have tried really hard, and our leadership has tried really hard to continue to keep those family values, know who people are, know their stories, understand what talent is coming on to our team, trying to and following through on, providing flexibility when we can, and, working with team members with any and all things that come up. There's lots of things in life that you can't predict. And I think, we've worked really hard to keep those family values. And so we want people that have that similar approach to, you don't necessarily have to have a family. You don't actually, but those values that you see, with your, mom and dad or brother and sister, like those are things that are important to us. And we want our team members to feel that. And then the last thing, that we're looking for is a bit of a spirit of innovation. I think that's really important. When you think about that, I'm not talking about like creating patents or anything like that. I think that's great if you do. But when you talk about innovation, you can simplify that quite a bit. Innovation can mean I took this process that usually took 20 minutes and now it takes 12. That's a significant time saver. And if you multiply that across multiple days, multiple weeks, that's hours back in time. And then if you quantify that into dollars, whether you're in sales, parts, HR, IT, those are all things that add value. So we want people that aren't just looking to keep doing the status quo. We want them to grow and learn and develop and ask questions and be involved in the business and affect change. So that those are the things, when we talk about culture, we talk about attitude. Those are the main three things that we look for here at Van Wall. And I think that's what's helped us create, an awesome company and an awesome culture.
Fantastic. Okay. So now I've got one kind of double loaded question for you guys. And Taylor, I'll start with you. But I want to ask if you have any advice for your younger self, because I think this last set of questions, I really want to gear it towards the HR professionals that are out there, specifically ones that are at dealerships. And so I want you to pass on two pieces of advice. Essentially, what advice would you give to your younger self? And then what do you lean on to adapt and grow professionally?
Great question. So advice for younger self, and this kind of ties into what you just talked about, right? But I think take risks, whenever you can, right? I think that's probably, we started this organization just a few years ago, and I wish it would have been 10 years ago, right? And so I think that's the biggest thing is taking risk and believing in yourself and taking ownership. And I think that's probably the advice I would give to myself. I think at times you can kind of fall into this box, right? Of like, hey, here's what I'm supposed to be doing and how I'm supposed to do it, right? And you can kind of be in that rut. And I think, lifting your head up a bit and being willing to innovate and challenge yourself more often and not so much being afraid to fail, right? Like failure is growth, and fail quickly and innovate and move on. I think that's the biggest thing. I wish I would have done sooner in my career. So that'd be the number one. I think on the back half of that is, how to, and your question, Andy, was like how to continue to.
How do you continue to grow? Like,
relevant,
for you, what do you look for? What do you lean on to grow professionally?
That's a great question. I would say for myself, it's really my network. I'd say it's the people that I surround myself with is what I lean on more times than not. Admittedly, not a big reader. I wish I was, but building a group of individuals around you that are high performers that are going to continue to push you and believe in you and be invested in who you are as a person, as a professional. I think that's where I go to, is those folks that I've been lucky enough to have around me professionally and personally.
Good. Scott, what about you?
I took notes, so I can go through both of those. So my answer is going to be somewhat similar to Taylor's, but it's challenging yourself to get out of your comfort zone. When I think about my career in the recruiting and talent acquisition space, when I first started, I would get so nervous, like on a new role that I had never recruited on. Like I remember when I was working on a mechanical engineer recruit for the first time, I'm like, oh my gosh, like these people have bachelor's and master's degrees and they're so much smarter than I could ever be. Like, you'd almost psych yourself out. So what I am glad I did is I did take on that opportunity. But I think my advice for my younger self would be preparation is key. And I've held that true to myself at every interview that I've ever conducted or any interview that I've been a part of. If you prepare, you can provide an exceptional experience. When you think about a hiring experience, it doesn't matter if you're hiring, an entry-level role or an executive in the business. People want to understand what's the job. They want to understand what's the culture like. Why is the position open? It doesn't matter what the role is. People have similar interests, and the reason why they're interested in it is how you can present the opportunity. So if you prepare appropriately and do a good job. So my advice is just get out of your comfort zone, continue to try new things would be the big thing, and I think that's something that I've learned to embrace. There's always the unknown, but you can prepare, and as you can prepare, you gain comfort with whatever is new and coming your way. The other thing, if I look at my notes, from a personal development standpoint, for me, a lot of my personal development would come from LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been a great resource for me. There's lots of, talent acquisition related articles, HR related articles. One thing that is, specific to Van Wall. There's a farm equipment magazine. I've subscribed to that, and they have a variety of, just engaging articles or engaging videos. And I've attended their conferences. I've presented at one of their conferences, and it's just very relevant to the space that we're in. So I'd say that space, and then LinkedIn would be my two avenues for staying up to date and, continuing to grow myself.
That's good. I mean, LinkedIn is essentially the social media network that was built for you guys. So Good deal. Well, Taylor, Scott, I really appreciate your time today, sharing all the advice that you guys have, kind of your experience in the industry, outside of the industry. It's just been invaluable. And it's also, the niche of talking about talent within the dealership space might get niche enough that it doesn't get talked about enough. And so I really appreciate everything you guys have been able to provide.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Andy. It was awesome.
Okay, fantastic. Well, to all of our viewers and listeners out there, thank you for joining us on Beyond the Hood with Tractor Zoom. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe, like, and share this podcast on any of your podcasting channels. And until next time, this is Andy Campbell with Beyond the Hood. Take care.